Imagine 40,000 men surrounded in a shadowless desert, hearing only the whistling of arrows before they felt the pain. There is no heroic speech, no victory music, only the dry sound of bodies falling on the hot sand of Mesopotamia. On May 6, 53 BC, on the dusty plains near Carrhae, the army that Rome considered invincible began to crumble in silence. Shields broke, armor was pierced as if it were made of clay, and the famous legionary discipline was transformed into pure survival. At the center of this chaos was a man who believed he could buy even the favor of the gods, Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest in Rome, about to discover that there are ambitions for which gold is not enough. In this battle, wealth met the desert, arrogance found the perfect strategy, and Rome tasted the bitter taste of absolute humiliation. Stay until the end, because here you will see how a single mistake crushed an empire in a few hours of sand and blood. The heat of Mesopotamia seemed to come out of the ground itself. The air trembled over the sand as 40,000 Roman legionaries, exhausted, looked up and realized the truth that no one wanted to admit. There was no way out, no woods to shelter, no hills to fortify, no rivers to cross, just an endless emptiness, and around it a circle of Parthian horsemen that closed slowly, like a noose around Rome's neck. The first arrows arrived almost silently, then in waves. Every impact on shields and bodies sounded like a verdict. On May 6, 53 BC, Carrhae ceased to be a dot on the map and became a death sentence, and the man who had dragged Rome there still believed he could buy his own glory. Little did Marcus Licinius Crassus know that, before sunset, his wealth, his pride, and even the future of the Republic would be crushed there, under that merciless sky, in the face of an enemy that Rome never really understood. All for him. For 4 centuries, the world had learned to fear the same sight. An endless line of rectangular shields, banners in the wind, and helmets gleaming in the sun. The legions of Rome marched as if they were a single creature of iron, trained not to hesitate, not to retreat, not to feel pity. From misty Britain to the mountains of Hispania, from the African deserts to Greek cities, the Roman heavy infantry had crushed all resistance with almost inhuman discipline. Each soldier knew exactly where to stand, when to advance, when to kill. Seen from afar, they looked like a moving wall. Seen up close, they were a sentence. But while the world bowed before this war machine, Rome rotted from within. Corruption, factional hatred, secret deals, and personal ambitions eroded the very system that fueled the power of the legions. Behind the victories and parades, the Senate was seething with intrigue and bribery, while generals dreamed less of Rome and more of eternal fame. At the top of this, Rome divided into 3. The so-called First Triumvirate rose Caesar, the genius who transformed Gaul into the stage of legend itself; Pompey, the consecrated hero of the East, loved by the people; and finally, Marcus Licinius Crassus, the man whose gold seemed to have no end. But wealth there was little. In the capital that venerated victorious generals as demigods, fortune without glory was almost a public humiliation. Caesar sent letters full of victories, Pompey collected triumphs and statues, and Crassus, he bought allies, bought favors, bought silence. He could finance entire wars, but he was still seen as the ambitious banker trying to don the armor of a soldier. Every time Caesar's name echoed in the forums, something inside him burned. It was not enough to be rich. He wanted to be feared, celebrated, eternal. This secret hunger for glory began to guide every decision. The East for him was no longer a distant frontier, but a promise of personal triumph. There he would prove his real worth. Before dreaming of Carras, Crassus had already shown the world how far his coldness went. After the civil wars, while many were counting losses, he saw opportunity in the flames. Rome was a city of wood, cramped, flammable. When a neighborhood began to burn, entire families ran in panic. And then Crassus appeared, not with free help, but with a proposal: sell the burning house for almost nothing or see everything turn to ashes. Behind him, a private brigade of trained slaves awaited order. If the owner accepted, they put out the fire. If he refused, they watched in silence as the roof collapsed. Brick by brick, ruin by ruin, he bought half the city. It has enriched itself with other people's disasters, mines, lands, suffocating loans. Each crisis was, for him, another step. The more houses burned, the more properties appeared in his name. But as the gold piled up, one question came back as an echo. What's the point of being the richest if no one fears you as a general? Meanwhile, on the horizon that Crassus underestimated, an enemy shaped by another kind of war was growing. The Parthian Empire was not an exotic copy of Rome. It was a machine of its own, made up of noble warriors, rich cities, and endless plains. From childhood, its aristocrats learned to live on the back of a horse. Gradually, they transformed the compound arch into an extension of their own body. Those arrows were not simple projectiles. They flew away, tore shields, pierced iron. Instead of walls and tight formations, the Parthians relied on speed, distance, and disappearance. They attacked, retreated, returned. To Romans accustomed to crushing enemies hand to hand, this seemed like cowardice. In fact, it was a brutal art perfected generation after generation. They mastered the Parturian shot, the deadly shot fired backwards as they pretended to flee. Those who persecuted died before understanding the trap, and when they wanted to crush the enemy, they launched the heavy cavalry, men and horses covered with metal, advancing like a living, battering ram. When Crassus decided to attack Parthia, he did not ask the Senate for serious permission. He trusted in his own name and in his own gold. 7 legions, some 40,000 men, plus auxiliary knights and archers, formed an army that on paper seemed irresistible. The plan was simple: cross the Euphrates, cut through the desert, and reach wealthy cities before the enemy reacted. Warnings were not lacking. Augurs saw bad omens in the sacrifices. A tribune tried to stop the match. Banners fell to the ground as if refusing to follow him. Crassus ignored everything. When a local guide, Ariamnes, promised a faster route through the arid countryside, he accepted without hesitation. Day after day, the sun burned. Water was scarce, and the feeling of being watched grew with each march. Small groups of Parthian horsemen would emerge in the distance, watch, and disappear into the dust before any pursuit was possible. It was not Rome hunting an enemy. It was Rome being led. Ariamnes, the guide on you, whom Crassus had bet everything, suddenly disappeared. The trap was ready. At dawn, on May 6th, the dust on the horizon ceased to be a mirage. Parthian cavalry emerged en masse, slowly surrounding the exhausted legions. Crassus had the traditional lines formed, shields erected, pylos ready, the human wall that had already destroyed so many enemies. But the Parthians did not advance. They began to circle around the Romans, like wolves around an encircled animal. Then came the drums, a deep rumble that made the chest flutter, followed by a roar of leather and bronze horns. It was a soundstorm made to break nerves before breaking bones. When sound dominated everything, the sky darkened. Thousands of arrows fell on the Romans. The testudo was formed, but even it began to give way under the force of those projectiles. Shields were filled with arrows, heavy as spiked doors. Projectiles pierced through wood, iron, and skin, trapping arms and legs. Men fell inside their own formation, crushed by their comrades who tried to stay on their feet. Each step broke the perfect design of the Roman lines. The enemy, distant, remained untouched, as if the battle were an exercise. Desperate to break the siege, Crassus made the mistake that would seal not only the battle, but his own fate. He entrusted his son, Publius, with an almost impossible mission: to lead the best available cavalry, archers, and elite infantry to attack the Parthians directly and force them to retreat. When the charge began, it seemed to work. The Gallic horsemen advanced in fury, and the enemy cavalry turned around, fleeing toward the horizon. From the main lines, the legionnaires watched with a hope they had not felt for hours. It seemed, finally, the first good news of that infernal day, but it was only the beginning of the trap. The more Publius persecuted, the further he moved away from the legions, until suddenly the archers opened up and revealed something much worse. Ahead came heavy Parthian cavalry, men and horses covered in metal, spears pointed like a sharp wall. The shock was devastating. Surrounded, riddled with arrows, with no escape, Publius chose to die there rather than be displayed as a trophy. The Parthians beheaded him anyway and carried his head in triumph to the Roman lines. When the Parthians raised Publius's head before the legions, something broke for good in the Roman army. It was no longer just fear, it was a cold certainty that they were doomed. Crassus saw his son's face transformed into a trophy and almost collapsed. At night, covered by a sickly silence, the survivors tried to flee towards Carras, leaving thousands of wounded behind, given over to the enemy dawn. Roman discipline, the pride of generations, dissolved into scattered groups wandering in the dark. When they finally reached the city, they were exhausted, hungry, besieged, and without a plan. Surena, the Parthian general, then offered negotiations, a peace in exchange for concessions. It seemed the only way out to avoid complete extermination. Crassus left for the escorted encounter, trying to save what remained. No one knows for sure who drew the sword first, but the result was simple. Within moments, he lay dead, far from his legions. Later, chroniclers would speak of gold poured into his mouth and of his head displayed as a trophy. Legend or not, the lesson remained. In the end, about 20,000 Romans lay dead. 10,000 were captured and sent to borders so distant that Rome became only a memory. The eagles of the legions, sacred symbols of honor, remained in Parthian hands for decades. The myth of Roman invincibility had been torn apart in the middle of Mesopotamian sand. Politically, Crassus's death destroyed the fragile balance of the triumvirate and paved the way for civil war between Caesar and Pompey. Militarily, Carras has become an obligatory study of everything that should not be done. Invade without knowing the enemy, ignore terrain, despise advice, rely too much on numbers. But above all, the battle has exposed the price of ambition that knows no bounds. Crassus wanted to be remembered as a hero. It has become synonymous with fatal error. His story echoes as a warning. How many times do we get into blind fights, ignoring signs and insisting only for pride? If this story marked you, like, comment and subscribe. It helps the channel to continue bringing hidden truths from Rome.